Hello and welcome to the WRAP, WRAL's weekly politics podcast. I am Will Doran, your host this week, and you're just going to be hearing from me today. It's been a heck of a week in North Carolina politics, a lot going on, and I am the last NC Capitol reporter standing on our team here, so I'm going to be delivering this podcast by myself. The elections are heating up. We saw earlier this week, even if it feels like a year ago, that RFK Jr., Cornel West, and the Constitution Party all got one step closer to ballot access for the presidential race here in North Carolina. That is huge news because with voters as dissatisfied as they are with, which we've seen in polling with Biden and Trump and wanting other options, there's a chance that we could see a lot more appetite for a third-party candidate this year than we have in years past. And of course, in addition to Cornel West, RFK Jr., and the Constitution Party's candidate, if they are allowed to get on the ballot, we're also probably going to see the Libertarian Party have a candidate on the ballot here, the Green Party have a candidate on the ballot here. So it could be a pretty crowded ballot for our presidential race. And, there's been some polling that shows, potentially if Jill Stein were to run again, she could get maybe 3 or 4% of the vote. Maybe Cornel West could from the more progressive standpoint. RFK Jr. polling pretty well in some polls. There was one in April from Quinnipiac that found him with double digits here in North Carolina, which I don't remember the last time a candidate got double digits. Maybe Ross Perot back in the day. People can correct me if I am wrong about that. Please do. But more going on as we gear up for our elections. The State Board of Elections this week had a very lengthy meeting talking about early voting plans and approving some of those. It kind of illustrated a lot of partisan divide on the board over, should we have Sunday voting? Should we have polling places here? Should we have it there? In general, Democrats are more in favor of more options and especially Sunday voting, and Republicans tend to oppose Sunday voting. There were a lot of political fights over those. Democrats have control of the board, and so they won. They got their way in a lot of these contested, or all of these contested plans, and were able to greenlight some more Sunday voting options for counties around the state. People don't all like the fact that Democrats have a majority on the board. State law says that whichever party controls the governor's office also has a control of the 3-2 majority on the State Board of Elections. So if you've got the governor's office, you get 3 votes. If you don't have the governor's office, you get 2 votes. The state Republican legislature, who is currently in the minority, is trying to get rid of that ahead of this year's elections to take away Democrats' ability to make some of the rules and some changes potentially to election rules as the elections get started here. There is a law over that has been ruled unconstitutional, but the legislature is asking the state Supreme Court to fast track its own hearing on that to hopefully reverse the past precedent that led to this being ruled unconstitutional and allow them to implement this new plan that would have an even split on the State Board of Elections, a 2-2 split. So the legislature is asking the Supreme Court to do that. I think it's fair to say that the Supreme Court is expected to grant that request to fast-track the case. Democrats did the same thing when they had control of the Supreme Court. They fast-tracked a few cases that ended up helping their party in 2022. We are still waiting on that decision as I record this on Friday, but that is likely to happen. So we will see what the court does with that once they take up the case. On the campaign trail, earlier today, Josh Stein had an event. He said it is the anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Griswold v. Connecticut, which is, maybe not the kind of kitchen table discussion that everyone's having during the elections, but that case is about birth control access nationwide. And he said that he believes Mark Robinson wants to ban birth control. He said he believes this because Mark Robinson went to an event this past weekend in Tennessee where he spoke. It was hosted by a group that opposes birth control. So I asked Josh Stein at this event today, what has Mark Robinson said about his opposition to birth control? Can you point me to anything where he said, if I'm governor, we're going to restrict birth control, we're going to crack down on this? And Stein said he didn't point to anything that Robinson has said, but he said, well, the fact that he went to this event at all should speak for itself. He traveled hours, went out of his way to go to a different state to speak for this group. And so I reached out to the Robinson campaign. They say he does support birth control. He said, yes, Mark Robinson does want stricter abortion laws in North Carolina than we currently have. He supports a 6-week ban, which is half of our current 12-week ban. But they said he also favors continued access for both IVF and birth control. These are issues that are going to continue coming up this whole year. We saw this same week in the U.S. Senate, Democrats held a vote on a bill that would protect birth control access, and Republicans shot that down. Both of our Republican senators here in North Carolina, Tom Tillis, Ted Budd, voted against that bill to protect birth control access. And Republicans say that, this is just a campaign stunt by the Democrats. Democrats say, no, this is for real. They point to, just last month, Donald Trump said that he was looking at a plan to restrict Plan B and other contraceptions should he come back into office. That caused a stir, and the Trump campaign later said, no, he's not. He didn't mean that. It's an issue in national politics and now in local politics as well. Stein and Robinson fighting over whether or not Robinson would follow that GOP trend that some of the social conservative groups have pushed to ban or at least further restrict access to birth control. It was the theme of Josh Stein's first ad of the election. You don't often see TV ads start up this early in an election year, but Josh Stein has a lot of money in the bank, and he is putting ads on TV all about Mark Robinson's own words about abortion, his own stance on abortion, his views on women who get abortions. The Robinson campaign says, good luck, Josh Stein, if you think that hitting Robinson on abortion is going to be a winning strategy. They say that Sherry Beasley tried that in her 2022 race against now U.S. Senator Ted Budd, and look who won. It was Ted Budd. They think that voters are not as passionate about the abortion issue as Democrats think and hope they are. I will note Robinson does not have any of his own ads up on TV yet, and he is lagging behind Josh Stein in fundraising. Stein has raised about $19 million, has $12 million in the bank as of the latest campaign finance records that I looked up this week. Robinson has raised almost $11 million, has about $4.5 million left in the bank. So he only has about a third of the money actually in the bank that Josh Stein does right now. And so we saw at the legislature a new bill pass the Senate. It was unveiled to the public and then a couple of minutes later passed in a pretty quick fashion that would essentially allow corporations to do an end run around the state's current ban on corporate donations. And lawmakers were pretty clear that this is to help the RGA, the Republican Governors Association, more directly fund the Robinson campaign. They believe that with the current way that the campaigns are set up and state law is interpreted, the Democratic Governors Association has an easier time giving money to the state political party, which can then pass it along to the Stein campaign, than the Republican Governors Association has with passing its money on to the NCGOP. And that really has to do because the Republicans do not segregate their funds. They're allowed to take money from corporations, which here in North Carolina, individual candidates are not. But the RGA can. They're a super PAC, so they can take all this money from corporations, but they're not allowed to then pass that on to state-level committees. The Democrats apparently segregate their funds. They have one fund that's for all their super PAC, corporate donations and labor union donations. They have a different fund that's for their kind of regular people donations. And so apparently the way the DGA does it is allowed here in North Carolina. The way the RGA does it is not allowed. And so the legislature would like to change the law and put Republicans on what they say is more of an even playing field. Of course, Democrats say, well, it is an even playing field right now. If you wanted to follow the law, you're just not doing that. You're changing the law instead of playing by the rules. So that was a big to-do at the legislature on Thursday. All of the Senate Democrats skipped that vote. Some of them walked out in protest of the chamber, held a press conference outside decrying this as political money laundering to help the Robinson campaign as it struggles to keep up with the Stein campaign and its fundraising. I will note this was all tacked on to a completely separate bill about, are you allowed to wear masks in public for health reasons? People will remember a few weeks ago, Senate Republicans proposed getting rid of the state law that allows people to wear masks in public to protect their health. That caused a whole lot of controversy, not just here, but it made national news. And some of the Republicans in the House, especially those who are in a little bit more competitive seats than their Senate colleagues, said, wait a second, we need to pump the brakes on this. This is freaking people out. And so they kind of came to a compromise that was unveiled Thursday, combined with these campaign finance law changes. And that would allow people to continue wearing masks in public for health reasons. It would make it more clear that it has to be a medical grade mask. And this is all kind of aimed at cracking down on protesters who have been wearing masks when they protest, sometimes to protect from health concerns and sometimes to hide their identities. So this would say that you can't wear a T-shirt over your face, a ski mask, a keffiyeh, something like that to protect or hide your identity. You would have to wear an actual medical grade mask. The bill would also crack down on protesters in some other ways. It would amp up criminal penalties for people who block roads when they go to protest, and it would make it easier for people to sue protest organizers if it does end up blocking a road, particularly if that ends up blocking emergency vehicles like an ambulance from taking someone to the hospital or arriving to treat someone who's in a medical emergency. Some Republicans were a little angry about this because they wanted to get rid of the mask provision. Some Democrats were a little angry about this because they think it's cracking down too harshly on protesters. But in the end, it's a compromise that Republicans and I think some Democrats can get behind on trading some of these protest crackdown rules for keeping that mask provision in the law. So that was just one thing on Thursday that was multiple stories. There was a ton happening at the legislature this week. I think our whole NC Capitol team wrote something like 20 plus articles this week. It was just one thing after another after another. I'm going to take a quick break right here, and when we come back, we are going to talk about a little more of what we saw happening at the legislature. Stay tuned. And we're back with the wrap. This is Will Doran, WRAL state government reporter, talking about this week at the state legislature and all around state politics. We had a really spicy DMV hearing on Thursday that actually kind of got preempted by all of this drama over the masks and the campaign finance stuff that just popped up completely out of nowhere. None of that stuff was announced that it was going to be happening in advance. So everyone was scrambling to jump on that. In the meantime, Wayne Goodwin, the DMV commissioner, is just kind of hanging out because they had paused the oversight hearing where they were grilling him to go handle all this. So, they just had to kind of hang out, wait to come back and finish receiving their lashes. State lawmakers and I think a lot of the general public are not happy with the DMV right now. There are massive, massive delays, especially with getting driver's licenses. Representative Sarah Stevens said that she went to get one updated recently, and it took nearly 2 months for her new license to come in the mail. And beyond just being annoying and frustrating, this is a real political concern because we have our elections coming up, and this is, as people know, the first major election that we're having with the new voter ID rules. And so there's expected to be a large rush of people as the election gets closer and people realize, oh, my license is expired, or, oh, my license is at the wrong address, or, hey, I lost my license and I need to go get it to vote. Any reason, there could be a whole lot more people than normal going to get their license renewed. And if it's already taking 6, 7, 8 weeks for those licenses to come in right now in May and June, how much worse is that going to be in September, October, when it's election season and people are trying to go, potentially to early voting, or they're getting their mail-in ballots, which they need to send their licenses in with, and realizing that they need to correct something with their license. So Republicans are pretty concerned with these, not just to beat up on Wayne Goodwin, who of course is a former head of the state Democratic Party, in addition to currently leading the DMV, but also for the implications that this could have for the elections and for voter ID as well. There were also, speaking of the elections, 2 new constitutional amendments proposed or talked about this week that could make it on the ballot. One is absolutely not going to make it on the ballot. That is Democratic Senator Greg Meyer's proposal to increase transparency in state government by making the legislature's records a public record. The legislature is doing the opposite and making their records even more secretive than they already were. And that was received pretty coldly by GOP leaders who said not going to happen. The other one that could make it on the ballot is one to keep immigrants banned from voting. So our state constitution already says that only citizens can vote here in North Carolina. And this new amendment would say the exact same thing, just with slightly different wording. Republicans say that even though it wouldn't actually change anything, it's needed to send a message. There have been some other cities, around a dozen or so across the country, some liberal cities. I think Washington, D.C. is one of them, maybe some tinier places up in Vermont, that have pushed to allow immigrants to vote in local elections. So immigrants still can't vote, in those places for president or Senate or even governor, I think. But, for their city council or school board, there is a push to let immigrants vote on those local races. Even though those liberal cities in those other states are doing that, that is obviously against the law here in North Carolina. Couldn't happen under the current rules, but the Republicans say, well, we need to send a message that we think it's a bad idea and we definitely don't want it to happen. Of course, this will probably help boost GOP turnout in the elections. Critics of this, Democrats and good government watchdog groups and types like that, say that this is going to trick people into thinking that we do currently let immigrants vote here in North Carolina. It's just going to fuel the fire of voter fraud claims and misinformation that we've already seen in the past few elections from the Donald Trump campaign that are expected to continue as he runs for president a third time. It's going to pass the House, this amendment. It's backed by House Speaker Tim Moore, a bunch of the other most powerful House Republicans. It will pass the House. The question is just whether or not the Senate also signs off on this. The exact same provision was filed in the state Senate over a year ago by a pretty large number of the Republican state senators, and it has gone nowhere. So I don't know if that's because top Republican leadership in the Senate thinks this is a silly idea, or if they were just waiting to do it until now when it's a little bit more closer to the election. People are paying a little bit more attention. You can kind of get some more juice out of it. So we'll see how that fares in the state Senate. It's almost certainly going to pass in the House. A vote on that is expected this coming week. And then how it goes in the Senate, we will see what happens there. There were also some juvenile justice changes that passed, and one would kind of minorly roll back some of the reforms that we made in the Raise the Age bill a few years ago. For people who don't remember, North Carolina was the last state, the only state in the entire country that was still automatically charging every 16 and 17-year-old as an adult, no matter if they didn't have any prior record, no matter how serious or unserious the charge was. They were always being charged as adults. The day you turn 16, you're considered an adult in state court. No other state was doing that. So we changed that and went into effect in 2019. But now there's a push to kind of start rolling those back. And one bill that passed the legislature could soon become law if Governor Cooper signs it, would make for violent felonies. The 16 and 17-year-olds would go back to automatically being charged as adults. That same bill would also make some anti-gang changes. Basically, when an adult entices a younger person to commit a crime, which police say that gangs do frequently, since they believe that the young people will face less severe consequences if they get caught, that adult would actually end up being charged with the exact same crime that the younger person is charged with. So it's kind of an attempt to stop gang members from leaning on, younger teens and even tweens in their communities, try to push them into a life of crime. And that actually came out right at the same time as a new WRAL documentary on gangs was also publishing. So folks saw another WRAL reporter around the legislature this week. That was Kristen Severance, our documentarian, who was getting some final reactions on that issue. The timing just kind of so happened to be a perfect coincidence that documentary is publishing right as that bill was passing. But if people are interested in gang issues, I definitely suggest going to check that out. Just search for WRAL documentaries online, and it should be the very first thing that pops up. Kristen's great, does a lot of good work. That'll definitely be worth watching. Finally, let's talk about Native American burial grounds. How did that come up at the legislature this week, you might be wondering? Well, it came up in the most boring bill possible about coastal regulations and whether or not you need a permit to rebuild a deck after a storm if you're going to make your deck bigger. But stuck into that bill was this change to what happens when a developer is building some land, clearing some land, and finds archaeological findings there. Well, this would make it a whole lot easier for those developers to just keep on working. Right now, the state can order the development to stop so that they can come in and investigate what's being found to see if it is historically, archaeologically significant. And this relates to a development out in Carteret County that is trying to build some beach houses, but they found what state officials believe might be evidence of a ancient Native American burial ground. Now, the developers say, yeah, maybe some bones were found, but in general, we think this was just a Native American landfill is the words that the developers have used, that this isn't like a historically significant site, that this is just, maybe just some camp that was out on the beach at some point hundreds of years ago, but nothing much more to it. But they are pushing the legislature hard to change the law because the state's Department of Natural and Cultural Resources is not letting up. They want to keep investigating the site. They believe that there is a lot to it. I wrote a lot about this because also I found while I was sitting in this hearing, listening to the lawmakers go back and forth about this, I said, I should start looking up these developers. And so I pulled up their names, ran them through the state campaign finance website, and lo and behold, they have recently donated $7,500 to the state senator, Michael Lazara from Onslow County, who was pushing this change in the law. So I spoke with Senator Lazara after the meeting. I said, hey, you're pushing these new changes that would help out this development. Those developers have given you thousands of dollars. What do you have to say about that? And he said, that is true. But he said this would help all developers around the state, not just these people. And he said that, and I've heard this from other people as well, this is apparently an issue with lots of building here in North Carolina because, hundreds of years ago, we had so many Native American tribes all throughout the state that, developers start clearing land. They find some bones or some arrowheads or some pottery, and then it starts adding costs, delays, more money that they have to spend on these projects. And so his position and the position of the Home Builders Association is that if we get rid of these archaeological requirements and just make it easier for these builds to go on, even when they do find what might potentially be an archaeological find, that's going to make housing more affordable. It's going to, if it doesn't cost as much to build a big housing development because you're not having to spend money on archaeological digs, then, those costs won't be passed on to the consumers. State Senator Michael Woodard had some problems with that argument. He said, look, I am all for building housing, all for building affordable housing, but that does not mean that we need to be just completely bulldozing over what could be potentially sacred sites, or at least sites with, historical or archaeological significance. So that is something that is not a done deal yet. It is still being debated in the state Senate. It would have to, of course, go through the House as well. But that's an interesting little story on on money in politics. And, even as we see some efforts by the legislature to cut down on transparency in government, that is a reminder on why public records and transparency still matter. So I will get off my soapbox with that. Thank you for listening this week. Again, this has been Will Doran with WRAL State Government Team. And check out all of our podcasts, all of our newsletters, all of our documentaries. We have a ton of great content, no matter how you like to get your news, whether it's on TV or online or from your phone. We hope you're watching and listening and reading. I'll talk to you again next week.